is some good advice from Samuel Beckett, the playwright. Ever tried? Ever failed? No matter. Try again. Fail again. Fail better. Last week, I failed worse, not better. And my failure in trimming this bush in our front garden is on public display. Donna saw I was butchering the bush and quickly took over the job. In my Christian life, I've gained a lot of experience failing God, but rarely this publicly. Failing to be what God wants me to be, disregarding Him, disobeying Him, hurting others. I've had so many faith failures. Perhaps you have as well. Our passage this morning follows a massive failure by Peter, the disciple who swore his utmost loyalty to Jesus. At their last meal together, Jesus predicted everyone would desert him. Peter spoke up, "Lord, even if I must die for you, I will not deny you." And yet he did, big time. By denying he even knew Jesus 3 times to 3 different people. Within hours of doing that, Jesus had died an agonizing death. Can you imagine the guilt and shame that Peter was experiencing that Friday night and all Saturday morning? The last thing the master heard him say was a lie. Then comes Resurrection Sunday. 2 women go to the tomb and find it empty. A white-robed young man tells them, "Don't be alarmed. He isn't here. He is risen from the dead. Go now and tell his disciples, including Peter, that Jesus is going ahead of you to Galilee. You will see him there." Something is afoot back up north. And our gospel reading is all about it. Can you imagine what was on Peter's mind during this 5-day walk north of Jerusalem as he's preparing to meet Jesus? Very likely he's struggling with his denial and worried about what Jesus was going to say to him. He had failed so miserably. Jesus had something planned for Peter, and he made very sure he got the invitation. Look at these words. "Now go and tell his disciples, including Peter." There's obviously some unfinished business between the 2 of them. But the invitation is pretty vague. Go to Galilee. By the way, 4 of the 7 disciples who made that journey were fishermen. In fact, the very first encounter they had with Jesus was when they were fishing for their livelihood at the same lake 3 years before. So Peter's now back, and just instinctively he says, "I'm going fishing." And they said to him, "We will go with you." And they went out, got in the boat, and that night they caught nothing. Poor fellow. Peter is thinking, I failed as a disciple, and now I'm even failing as a fisherman. Can you imagine how low he's feeling at this point? But then they all hear a voice of someone from the shore, suggesting they cast their nets on the other side of the boat. The disciple who wrote this account said, "It's the Lord." He recognized his voice. And when Peter hears this, he immediately jumps into the water and swims to Jesus. Nary a nibble until Jesus tells the disciples how to fish. This is exactly what happened previously. No fish until Jesus takes charge. I think this is a subtle reminder to all of these defeated disciples. When I first met you, I called you to be fishers of men. I'm still in control. There's work to be done. So what are you doing out there in the boat? Verse 9 of our reading tells us, when they had gone ashore, they saw a charcoal fire. Not flames, just red-hot charcoal. Do you think this might have reminded Peter of the failure that's not far from his mind? In John chapter 15, we're told Peter's denial on Friday night took place around a charcoal fire. For Peter, these glowing coals are a painful reminder. But for Jesus, it's going to be a purifying fire of removing his shame. Okay, breakfast is over, and Jesus turns to Peter and asks him a question. You see, Peter's rejection was in public. And Jesus is going to make sure his restoration is also in public, because he plans for Peter to have a very public leadership role, and the disciples need to witness his restoration. Verse 15, Jesus said to Simon Peter, "Simon, son of John, do you love me more than these?" Peter has learned humility through the bitter experience of his failure. And he replies, "Yes, Lord, you know I love you." There's no reference to the others. He's making no claim to have a greater love for Jesus than the rest of the disciples. But something strange is going on here. 3 times Jesus asks Peter if he loves him. 3 times Peter affirms his love. This is strange. And by the way, this question and answer series is probably the most famous, celebrated Q&A time in the entire Bible. Let me step out of the story for just a minute and try to give you an example to explain what's going on here. Assume you and a friend are at a nice restaurant. The table next to you has a young couple enjoying a candlelit romantic meal. Comments during the evening reveal that they have a long, exclusive relationship. Now, you're not eavesdropping, of course, but you can't help but overhear something at the next table. The earnest fellow leans in and ask his date, "Are you willing to be deeply and unreservedly committed to me?" You give your friend a look and a nod. This sounds like a wedding proposal is coming. The young woman looks intently into the eyes of her date and says, "I treasure our friendship very much." Something's not working. Well, this is the sort of thing that was happening between Jesus and Peter in their conversation. Now, John is listening to them speak Aramaic. It's what all the disciples spoke to each other. But he's writing later in his gospel in Greek. And he could have his choice of 4 words for love. And here are the 2 that he chose to use. Agapao describes a devoted, sacrificial love. Phileo describes an affectionate friendship love. So here is how the conversation goes. Jesus said to Peter, "Do you love me with deep devotion?" Peter answers, "Yes, Lord, you know that I have great affection for you." A second time he is asked by Jesus, "Do you love me with deep devotion?" Peter answers, "Yes, Lord, you know that I have great affection for you." He said to him a third time, "Do you have great affection for me, Peter?" Peter said to him, "Lord, you know everything. You know that I have great affection for you." John is carefully choosing which word for love to use to reflect the nuance of what he's hearing in this conversation. This is God's word that we're talking about. And in the book of Hebrews, it's described as living and active, discerning the intentions of the heart. The Bible has the power to speak to our hearts. Let me tell you what my heart hears. Peter is struggling with shame and guilt, and he is unable to affirm the level of love that Jesus asks of him. But Jesus, in turn, demonstrates unconditional love for Peter by coming down to his level. With his shame and with his diminished love for the Lord, it's like Jesus says, "Let's start here, Peter. Full of forgiving grace, I want to restore you." I need this so much. My heart needs to know Jesus fully sees my repeated failures and welcomes me with open arms regardless. I really failed my older daughter named Lisa. We had been living in Germany for 10 years. That's where Lisa grew up. In 1990, we moved back to the USA for 1 year before we were going to take our next assignment, which was here in the UK. During that year, Lisa completed her last year in high school, and her identity was American. She didn't want to start all over and get another identity in England. And she asked to stay and go to uni in the US, which of course we said yes. She started uni, and as often happens, she lost her way. Staying close back then was really hard without the internet and mobile phones. We became aware that she was making some lifestyle choices that were not what we hoped for her. And this started an awkward, strained period in my relationship with her. I did not handle it very well. My attitude made our very infrequent trips back across the pond to visit her awkward. She sensed my disappointment and pulled back emotionally as well. It took a few years for a full restoration of our relationship, and for me to move beyond having failed her and failed God, the God, by the way, that I was claiming to serve in full-time Christian ministry. So I very much identify with Peter here. But Jesus' love for him was just as strong as they were having this breakfast conversation as it was when he was being denied 3 times. Based upon such love, at the end of their conversation, Peter is given 2 commands. Jesus says, "Follow me and feed my sheep." You see, for Peter, his professed phileo friendship love grew into devoted agapao sacrificial love as he obeyed Christ by following him and feeding his sheep. He was seen as the key leader of the early church, And he ended up showing his love for Jesus in the way he died, crucified in Rome in the late 60 ADs. Jesus in our passage actually hints to Peter how he would die by saying, "You will stretch out your hands and someone will take you where you do not want to go." Tradition holds that Peter was crucified upside down, feeling unworthy of dying in the same manner as Jesus. Peter was not loved any less for his repeated failures, and we are not loved any less for ours. He was left with the final words of our passage ringing in his ears: "Follow me." And the Spirit of God is saying the same thing to you and me this morning. We have no power within ourselves to be faithful, good, obedient followers of Jesus. The life, the death, and the resurrection of Jesus that we have just celebrated were necessary in order to save us initially. But they're also necessary to keep rescuing us from ourselves. In amazing, condescending grace, God meets us with open arms, just as we are, just as he did with Peter. I use a lot of visuals in my sermons, as you've come to know over the years. This is the favorite one. This is by far, to me, the most special image I have ever seen. As we continue to struggle and fail, Paul reminds us in 2 Timothy, if we are faithless, he remains faithful. He restores us when we are unfaithful. He meets us in our doubt. He pursues us when we wander. He empowers us when we are weak. And he heals relationships that we have broken. I'd like to leave these 5 sentences on the screen as I close. Does any one of these particularly resonate with you this morning? Please use that statement for just a moment before we continue to help you refocus away from your failures and toward the God who offers undeserved love to you.